I would do is I would try to work with the stuff that isn't in my head. Who is this Watson? Can I come up with some examples from my life to relate to him? Can I come up, like, Freaky Freud is actually one of mine, because he was a bit of a freak. You know, everything's sex. Watson, I have a way of remembering him. I call him the son of a bitch. Those of you who are in psych, you know, that's one of my things. And why do I call him the son of a bitch? Because he was famous for doing a terrible study on children, on a little boy called Little Albert, and it was just mean.
Very harsh.
It's very harsh. And it was old, it was a long time ago, but it's still, you know, as soon as I say Watson, son of a bitch, I remember it. So you work on elaborating. Then I do another spew on the stuff I didn't remember, and now if I remember it, I get rid of it. So what I'm constantly doing is getting rid of things I now know, working on stuff I don't. Now I have the whole spew method that I have written out as a pamphlet that if you email me, or I'll give it to Jane, and we can make it available to all students. Some of the academic skills people have it as well. But it's really about, I don't want to study stuff I don't need to. I always want to get down to what the essential bits. Studying and being prepared is the #1 way to address multiple choice tests. If you can generate the answer, then you're much more likely to do well. So that's the first bit. I do hear from students who say, I can do really well on short answer, but I do have problems with multiple choice. The first thing I always do is I say, is that actually true? And what I find is that oftentimes students think that they're doing better on one type of problem, but the problems that they're facing are the exact same problems. So it just feels bad, right? Because when you're doing short answer and you're getting 60%, you've written quite a bit, so you feel like you've generated something. Whereas when you do a multiple choice test and 4 of the questions you're like, oh, I don't know, it really makes you feel like you're doing worse than you really are. So first of all, check to see if that's true. What you would expect is that all the marks you lose should be on your short answer or on your multiple choice, and you should be perfect, pretty good at your short answer. But that's not usually the case, and that's because the same skills are required for both at the university level. The next thing is, maybe you are one of those people who has difficulty, and you need to sort of take a look, and there's 2 parts to this. There's some hints and suggestions about approaching a multiple choice test, and then there's what I call the test postmortem. I don't know how anybody gets to be a good student or a better student without doing an assessment of why did you get the things wrong on the test that you did. So I'll talk about the postmortem first because that's the most important part. Every time you do an exam, whether it's short answer or multiple choice, it's a time to sit down and say, why did you get the mark you got? So let's say, and I'm just using this as an example, let's say you got 60%. And a lot of students will say, oh, I thought I really studied well. I thought I was prepared. So obviously, I forgot 40% of the material. And what I see as a professor when I'm marking these things is that that's not always the case. So I have students come in, and I do this with intro, but it's easier with my smaller classes. And I say, you should take every test you do and go through what did you get wrong and why. And I divide my page when I'm working with students into 2. Things that you got wrong because today, looking at that question, you just didn't know the material. So it's kind of like, I have no clue what this answer is. That's a problem with your study method. That means that was fair game. You didn't have it in your memory. Why? Is it because you eliminated it, you just didn't know? Is it because for some reason it just didn't stick in your head? You need to understand, where are your study gaps? So that's a pretty specific problem. Often what I find is the problem where students will gravitate to the stuff they like and ignore the stuff they don't like. That's the #1 issue with their study. So they love the child psychology stuff, so they study that to death, and then they leave out anything to do with statistics. So you want to see if you're having patterns in your missing. What is it you're missing? Is it details? Is it more general topic areas? Those kind of things. But what's more interesting is the other half. And the other side of the page is, looking at it today, I know this answer. And those are the don't. And the question then becomes, why didn't you pick it? So unless you've been studying extra after the exam, does anybody do that? You study more after the exam is done? No, nobody does that, or very few people do. So if you know the answer, you know, a few weeks later when you're looking at your exam, this suggests it always was up in your head. So why didn't you pick the right answer? And what I see quite often are a number of patterns. So one of the things that's very common is students don't consider all the options. So what they do is they see A, and A looks kind of right, and they go, oh look, I recognize that, that goes with the right answer, and they don't read B, C, and D, and realize that further down the list, there was an answer that was a better choice. Because remember, it's just like my headache example, all of those things would be appropriate for a headache. So if you read aspirin, and you say, oh yeah, I'll take aspirin for a headache, that's fine, but you don't realize that all of the options, there was a better choice down the list. We're not looking for the correct answer, we're looking for the best answer. So did you pick an early answer that looked right and then ignore the rest? Another very common problem is in the test design. And this is a problem that us profs have, or we profs have. Us profs, that's really classy. So we profs have, and that is, we often will do something. It's like, which of the following is not? Have you come across these questions and they're worded and it's like, I'm not sure, and you almost have to figure out first what the question is asking? The reason why we often will word things this way is that it's easier to make up one true answer with a lot of false things that are absolutely not true than to come up with things that are true. So which of the following is not one of the, you know, so it's just an easier way. So unfortunately, it means sometimes we design these questions that are quite clunky. Now one of the things I notice with me is that as soon as somebody asks which of the following is not one of the areas of psychology, I would screw it up. I would mess it up because I was like, okay, what am I looking for? So now I know whenever I see these qualifiers or things that change from looking from true to false or looking for the correct for the incorrect, you may want to pay close attention. I will circle this and I won't do that question right away. I will save it to the end because I know I need to be clear.